Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of those that are in attendance. Thank you so much for being prompt and joining at the top of the hour here. Looking forward to be able to get into today's content. My name is Sam Jenks. I am the CRO as well as an SRM enthusiast. Some like to call me expert. With that being said, just a subject matter enthusiast, in my opinion. And looking forward to walking through today's buyer's guide of how to pick the right SRM tool. Um, we will be getting into today's content in just a moment. We want to let the guests that are attending have the opportunity to be able to jump in, as I know a lot of people are finishing up their last meetings. So we will give it just a moment more here to be able to see some more attendees drop in to the session as well. As you can already see in the chat, there will be a bit of interaction and engagement during today's session. Particularly, we're going to have some polls as well as then also a Q&A. The Q&A will be during the last 5 to 10 minutes. The polls will be throughout the session. Any point in time you feel like, hey, I have a question to be able to ask, don't hesitate. Drop that particular question in the thread, and we will then mark that particular question and get round to it at the end of today's session. That could be about us as a vendor. That could be about the content that you're seeing on screen. Absolutely free to be able to ask those questions. The slides themselves will be shared at the end, as well as then also recording to the session. So you will be able to be provided with the content for today. If you wait until the end of the session, which is runtime about 30 to 40 minutes, depending upon engagement today, then you guys will also have the opportunity to download the deck and the slides, which is very useful as we do offer up some different frameworks and methodologies today to those that are in attendance as well to be able to download. We'll then do a quick overview of today's agenda, as we see on screen here. We're going to be taking a look at Kodiak at a very quick glance, but then we're going to get into the bulk of today's session. The State of the Union, speaking a little bit about ProcureTech and SRM in 2026. What is kind of the current state of affairs? We want to look at point number 3, which is going to be overcoming 4 common objections. It's an interesting statistic. My team, within sales and marketing is not often in the room when technology is being evaluated. In fact, more than 80% of the time, we're not there at all. So it's up to you guys, of course, to be able to get the technology that you are looking to invest in. And therefore, that's an important part of this buyer's guide, is overcoming 4 very common objections that we see across our customer base on how they are able to build the case internally. We're going to then get into the 8-step go-to-market, which is then really the pinnacle of this kind of buyer's guide, or I would say the crescendo of the buyer's guide, allowing you guys to have 8 quick tips and tricks to be able to make sure that you know exactly how to go to market. And then we will finish off with a Q&A. To be able to make sure that we are staying as objective as possible, as we are, of course, a solution provider ourselves, we're not going to be providing any type of demo today during today's session. If you guys are interested in a demo, there will be an opportunity to be able to book one via a call to action, which we will then send out later during today's session. To be able to, before we get into today's content, maybe just heat up the chat. It's always fun to be able to see where people are calling in from, morning time, afternoon time, evening time. Please, if you don't mind, pop into the chat right now. A little hello, where you're calling in from as well. I'll do the same here. Calling from Boston, Mass at the moment. Whoops. I meant to write hello. I think that you guys recognize that. Yeah, please heat up the chat. Drop in who you are and where you're calling in from. Awesome. Joe from Leamington Spa. Hello. Darby in attendance. Chester. Great to see the UK mix. Hello, Dan from Houston, Texas. Johanna, nice to see you in San Jose. Awesome to see some different time zones mixed in here. All right, well, without further ado, let's get into today's content then. And we will first give a very quick view about who we are at Kodiak Hub to be able to make sure that everybody understands who we are as a provider before we then focus on today's content. At a glance, Kodiak is a provider of supplier relationship management software. Our solution is headquartered out of Stockholm, Sweden. We are Scandinavian at heart, with that being said, but we do have teams across UK, DACH, and now the US, where myself is sitting. We have over 100 customers across the globe, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of suppliers utilizing the solution. We're a customer favorite, but don't take it from us. Feel free to look into some of the resources that are out there, and that will be part of our 8-step guide as well during today. Kodiak provides a modular solution, which you see on screen here. Today is not going to be about us, but if you're interested in learning more about our technology, then you can absolutely book a demonstration and see more about the technology at a later point in date. It's modular. It allows our customers to pick and choose those modules, and it's focused on not only creating a central source of truth for supplier information, data, documentation, collaboration workflows, but also, as you see, third-party risk screening, as well as then managing the life cycle within processes, everything from intake to onboarding and self-assessment, audits, and performance evaluation. Some of the teams that trust us across the globe, we see on screen here. We're very, very, very humbled to be trusted by so many, empowering so many world-class procurement teams. And who knows, some of those in attendance not only might be on the screen, on this particular screen of logo types, but hopefully we'll see maybe your company on the screen sometime in the future. Now let's get into today's content. I want to start with a simple overview which sets the scene of where things are at right now within procurement and supplier relationship management. This was a report that was issued by the Hackett Group, and I'll walk through what some of the fine text is, but every single year they release a key priorities report talking about the top priorities across procurement leaders. They interview hundreds of different procurement leaders across industry, and they came down to these 5 different areas: ensuring supply continuity, making sure that they work with cost reduction, deploying AI technology, transforming the operating model of procurement, and acting as a strategic advisor. Equal to this, the areas in which they were looking to operate to, of course, improve saving and create value realization were 3 distinct areas: supplier relationships, strategic sourcing, as well as then also category management. What does this put in focus? Well, it puts in focus that A, technology is important to start rolling out, A, to be able to, of course, meet the requirement of AI-enabled tech, transforming the operating model, being a strategic partner to the business, but equal to that, the SRM is essential. SRM technology and programs, of course, can be able to support with negotiation of vendors, strategic sourcing, as well as also category management. 3 of the key areas in which procurement leaders across the globe are looking to put priority today. With that being said, I'd love to hear from those of you that are in attendance today. Which of these particular priorities are really important for you? If we see the poll on screen here, and if you guys can be able to interact, it would be fantastic to be able to see. Of these 2026 key priorities, the top 5 that were listed by Hackett, what are the most important of those priorities for your particular business? Which are most pressing for you? So as you see here, there is an active poll on screen. Feel free to be able to get your voting fingers out and vote on this particular poll right now. We'll wait a moment to be able to get some responses back here. So feel free to vote. All right, interesting. I believe that you guys are all seeing the results here as well. Again, feel free to vote. Just take a moment to do so. Interesting to see the results are following very closely, of course, the Hackett report here. Ensuring supply continuity being number 1, but there is a big focus, as it seemed, on deploying AI-enabled tech as well as transforming the operating model. I think that those are some of the elements that we'll definitely be able to talk about today, which are important aspects, of course, of the value that technology has to be able to offer. A is, of course, how it can help your team to be able to work more strategically, work smarter, and also, of course, involve more stakeholders in the business across the enterprise. But equally, of course, deploy AI technology, which I know is on the tip of everybody's tongue. And every CEO is asking right now, how is your team working with AI? That, of course, is one of the aspects that we'll be able to cover during today's session as well. So thank you guys for being able to take some time to answer there as well. Getting back into today's content, I think that it's apparent that SRM is important, right? Based upon the areas that people are looking for value realization. Equal to that, though, you guys don't really have the tools that you need. Kodiak Hub did a study together with ProcureTech and found that only 28% of teams were applying modern technology for SRM. This means that a mix of over 70% of businesses are utilizing some blend of Excel and homegrown solutions to be able to get the job done. It's just not good enough, of course, in an environment where you guys are being expected to do more with less faster. What we do see is that there is a positive trend within the area of SRM, and happy to be able to have you guys here today because you're aligned with the market. There is not only increased investment within this space, but most of the time when rolled out, SRM technology is meeting expectations. This is also from the key priority report by Hackett. What do we see on screen here is at the very top, there is areas in which technology adoption and business objectives were looking to be realized. One of those key areas was supplier lifecycle or relationship management. A lot of pilots were deployed during 2025. And what was seen? Well, the majority of those particular projects not only met, but also exceeded the expectations that businesses had. With that being said, nearly 70% of businesses of those procurement professionals that were surveyed are now looking to invest in SLM or SRM technology during this coming year. So happy to be able to have you here. I think that we're right on the ball, of course, when it comes to alignment on expectations for SRM to be able to make an impact during 2026 and beyond. And it's a good thing that people are looking to invest in technology because the bottom line is that your jobs are getting exponentially, increasingly more difficult, more to do, with less resources. This also comes from the Hackett report. There's an expectation that workload is expected to increase by 8%. Alongside of that, decreases in headcount and operating budgets are also expected. So what does this mean? There will be an efficiency gap that we need to close. And what is the way to be able to do that? Well, technology is an opportunity, of course, to be able to create and augment our way of working, create efficiencies, and really ultimately find opportunities for savings. But this is a fact. Most of the time when you ask for technology in procurement, sourcing, supply chain, you're not getting the technology that you ask for. Budget isn't being allotted. And it's a shame. It's a crying shame. Procurement organizations globally help teams, within marketing, finance, sales, engineering, operations to buy continuously, when in reality, when they ask to buy, they aren't getting the budget allotted. This wakes, of course, an important question, which means how do we build a strong case to be able to invest in technology, SRM, or any procurement supply chain technology? Well, it's important, of course, that you're able to go forward with a strong case. And the fact is that it will not be myself as a subject matter expertise or, for example, a vendor that will be able to do that job for you. There's a lot of support that vendors can be able to provide. This, of course, session being one of those. But ultimately said, it's going to be you guys in the rooms that the vendors are not in that are going to be able to get the job done. B2B SaaS and AI buying, over 80% of the time, the seller is not in the room, which means, of course, that it's up to you guys as procurement and supply chain professionals to overcome objections and make sure that you have a solid case to make a purchase, making you, of course, be in that 17% rather than, of course, the 80% of people that aren't getting investment in technology. So let's, of course, address the elephants in the room. What are some of the common objections that we see? We've analyzed thousands of different transcripts across our company and our sales calls, and we've recognized that there's 4 common objections that we see within our prospective customer and existing customer base as to why it is that they are not looking to get investment in technology, not only with SRM, but procurement technology as a whole. These might be some objections that you guys recognize. Take a second to be able to read across these 4 different objections. How many times have we heard this in our business, right? Can we not just build this ourselves? Can we not just reuse another system, the SRM, for our suppliers? Can we not just use the existing ERP and Excel for this? Why should we invest? What's the ROI, right? I want to help everybody in this session to get ahead of some of these things that might stop you in your tracks before you even get started. So what I'm offering up here is some opportunities to some frameworks, some ammunition, some language that you guys can be able to utilize, of course, in those conversations internally. So let's take these one by one, starting with objection number 1. How many times have we heard this? Well, why would we pay another subscription fee? We could just, reuse our Microsoft apps internally. Sure, maybe so. You could build. With that being said, I think that the era of build versus buy is kind of no longer. It's buy versus buy, right? It's buying, of course, AI technology and trying to build, or for example, it's buying SaaS and AI technology that is from a vendor that has a finished package. I think that the reason we have to be able to combat on the build is very simple. It is time. And the fact is that we don't have time to wait anymore. We saw just now, of course, there is a workload increase. Time to be able to make impact on that workload needs to be able to be reduced. And therefore, investment in technology needs to close that efficiency gap. The moment that somebody says that they want to build, let's say that, for example, in January 2026 of this year, a few months ago, the beginning of Q1, somebody said, I want to be able to start a project. You got that thumbs up in IT. Awesome. You are anywhere from 12 to 15 months out at best to being able to actually roll out something and, of course, adopt that in the business. The average enterprise has a 4 to 7 month backlog on new IT. Approval cycles can take 6 to 12 weeks, and IT portfolios for large organizations are typically committed already for 8 to 12 months out, meaning that most of the time, new work, new projects are going to wait. And what's the upkeep afterwards? Building, of course, or choosing to build, quote unquote, can stall out the project before it even gets started. To be able to understand, because of course, building could be right for you, right? But to be able to understand if it is right for you or not, what we're offering up as an asset is a decision-making framework, a very simple point system, as you see on screen here, which allows our network to be able to evaluate, is this right for me? Based upon 3 primary categories. Starting from the bottom, it's the outcome urgency. How quickly do you need to roll something out? Who's going to own it? As well as then also the complexity and risk to doing something or not doing something in that case. This will be an asset that you'll be provided with. So you can, of course, utilize this to not only overcome that objection, but see, of course, where you fit within the area of build versus buy. Objection number 2. Let's just use that sales tool and repurpose it for SRM. Listen, I utilize a CRM on a day-to-day basis. It is my operating system. It is my execution layer. I love my CRM. The bottom line, though, is it's not an SRM technology, because I equally, on the other side, of course, sell our solution to procurement professionals. The day-to-day looks drastically different, and to be able to repurpose is very, very, very unlikely that you can be able to have the same experience on a day-to-day trying to repurpose a CRM versus an SRM. Why? Is because they're built for different stakeholders. They have different end goals in mind. Kodiak Hub looks very different than the strategic goal that HubSpot or Salesforce has. The strategic goal of a CRM is to drive sales and revenue growth and retention, customer lifetime value, whereas the SRM is focused on driving supplier value, helping you to drive performance, reduce risk, ensure compliance, and drive resilience, not revenue. Again, we've put together a framework, and a simple rule-based framework, meaning 6 out of 9 of the areas on the right-hand side of the screen, an SRM might be essential for a business of your stature. Whereas if you're on the left-hand side of the screen and not meeting, for example, 6 of the 9 on the right hand, then of course the CRM and repurposing the CRM may be good enough for you as well. The options are there to be able to work through. And again, the asset is going to be there for download at the end of the session. Objection number 3. Feels like we already have some of this stuff in our ERP. That's where our supplier data lives already. Why would we need another system? Well, the ERP is a strong and valuable and I would say essential solution to a lot of businesses. The ERP is your data foundation, but it is not an operating system. The ERP and an SRM, they're not combative. They are two peas in a pod when it's all said and done. They are two solutions that can work side by side in parallel and should work in parallel to be able to manage the life cycle of a vendor. ERP's primary objectives and features include things that are that transactional engine, POs, transactional master data, financials, spend. The SRM is the layer on top to manage the life cycle, helping you to have an execution and intelligence layer to actually be able to live in tandem alongside of the ERP that otherwise, for example, is hosting data rather than surfacing insights or allowing you to act upon them, which an SRM is excellent upon. Another decision-making matrix that we've provided to be able to give you an understanding when the ERP and utilizing, for example, maybe homegrown solutions alongside the ERP is good enough versus, for example, when an ERP plus an SRM may in fact be needed. This, of course, again, an asset that will be provided in the slides. Objection number 4, from every CFO at every company during every single budget cycle that has ever existed. Why would we buy a new tool? I get it, right? I see the pain, I see the challenges, but is it really worth the squeeze? Well, I'll remind you, Mr. CFO or Mrs. CFO, the procurement workload is expected to increase by 8%. And alongside that, we're looking to decrease headcount and operating budgets. You've asked me to be able to do more with less, faster. If we continue on the way that we're working, then we're continuing on with a status quo that is not good enough. That's already been indicated. I think that business cases get built so often that are so heavily focused on investment and outcome, ROI. I'd like to introduce a topic of COI, which I think that most of you guys have probably heard in some of our prior webinars. And the cost of inaction is differentiated from ROI in a very distinct way. COI is grounded in the existing inefficiencies and determining if I stay with the status quo, well, this is going to be the outcome. Whereas ROI relies on the projected improvements. COI is today's loss. ROI estimates the potential gains. They're both equally important to be able to show a proper business case to a CFO. With that being said, if we're only focused on the potential of gain, then we are focused on something that is not yet occurring and not yet prevalent within our business. If we're focusing on COI, well, then we are focusing, of course, on the risk of doing nothing. And that is, of course, a lot more central to the way that we're working today. We've put together a COI calculator to be able to view how an SRM solution and a program focused on supplier relationship management and lifecycle management can impact your business from an operational, tactical, and strategic perspective. We have, of course, mirrored this against our capabilities and our solution, albeit this is then what you should expect the value to be provided by any SRM program, any SRM provider that is out there on the market. If they're not able to hit upon these things, well, then they might not be the right SRM provider for you. This is taking an example of a particular business. You could be able to repurpose it for your particular business as well. And of course, the examples are directly there, as well as then also the formula. So now that, of course, we know how to overcome objections, let's get into the steps to be able to go to market. Here on screen, we see the 8 steps that are most important to be able to go to market for SRM software. Now, before I get into each of these individually, I want to be able to hear from those that are in attendance right now. Are you currently in market? Are you just gaining a understanding of the market? Are you building your momentum internally? Or have you already actually adopted a solution? Very relevant to understand where is the level of maturity of everyone that's in attendance today on their current journey with supplier relationship management solutions. So please take a moment to be able to answer the poll that's on screen now. Are you currently looking for a solution actively, right? Have you already adopted a system for SRM? Are you just getting educated, or are you just at the very, very, very beginning of your journey doing that initial market analysis and getting some awareness built in the business about the importance of a solution as well? I see some votes have rolled in. Please make sure to vote on screen now. I see that there is a gap between number of votes and the number of attendees, so please take a second to be able to vote really quickly here. We'll keep the poll open for just a moment more. Let the last few responses roll in. Righty. Well, it looks like, for example, there's about a 50-50 split here, and we'll stop the poll. As we can see in the results, half of those in attendance are really focused at the beginning of their journey, whereas half of the people in attendance are actively looking for an SRM solution, which is great. And we're humbled that, of course, you might be considering Kodiak. With that being said, for those that are early in your journey, I think that it's great timing, of course, to be able to understand. And those that are deeper in your journey, maybe, of course, you're in the midst of some of these steps, and maybe there's some things that you can be able to go back to, or, for example, accelerate forward. So let's get back into the elements. I'll remove this from the stream. Let's get back into the elements of the 8-step guide here that we have. Another 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the Q&A. The 8-step guide that we see on screen here is pretty distinct from the very beginning of the journey of defining the problem all the way to planning for real adoption. We're going to go through these one by one. I think the first point is pretty simple, right? Align on outcomes. Don't focus on the technology or the tool without knowing what the problem and the challenge is. You have to start with your end in mind and the end state. What is your 12-month, 24-month plan, right? Look at what's broken and not working, the pains and the challenges that you have, and start there. Don't start with features and functionality, because that is, of course, something that you can match against the pain and challenges. And you're not going to find a solution that does absolutely everything, that solves absolutely every pain and challenge that you have. But you will, of course, be able to map what are the most crucial to be able to map now, and what, of course, can we be able to develop with in the future. And, of course, then find a partner that you can develop with. Equal to that, make sure that you understand what is supposed to be in an SRM solution. Your challenges and problems might be, for example, limited. With that being said, you might have opportunity to grow, right? Managing supplier information, data, documentation, the internal workflows for approvals, corrective actions, collaboration. These are all essential elements of a platform. Additional to that, third-party risk management, the ability also to be able to run intake and onboarding, self-assessment, audits, performance evaluation, to be able to benchmark vendors on spend, on their performance, and alike. These are all essential elements that should be in an SRM. And of course, this can be matched against the elements that are within your problem or challenge base, and see, of course, if there is then overlap within that. Make sure that then you go to market, but go to market in a smart way, right? Google search exists, but so does AI. We've seen a lot of businesses starting to be able to work with their AI search. There is good and bad ways to be able to prompt. A bad way would be, well, what are some of the best SRM solutions that are out there in the market? A good prompt would be more structured, giving context to the AI, requirements to the AI, and tasks that you're looking to be able to develop. This is then on the left-hand side of the screen, a template for how you could prompt like a pro, and I'm sure that you could be able to build upon this. But of course, make sure that you have a goal, make sure that you have a role, for example. So you're maybe an analyst or a procurement software category expert, for example, right? You want to be able to be a technology advisor and have the tonality within the search, for example, of an advisor as well. These are all essential to the prompt that you're inputting to be able to do this AI search. Then get out there in the market, get active. Don't just, for example, sit within your own cocoon. Make sure that you back channel, look at peer insights, look at social proof out there in the market. Back channel with customers. Every LinkedIn site has, for example, a link to customers. So does, for example, website has case studies. Start there. Go, for example, to Kodiak or other providers' case study page. Find a customer that, for example, A, is aligned with your business or your industry, and reach out to that particular business. Reach out to that procurement or supply chain organization. Look at Capterra and G2 reviews. And lastly, of course, use your network. Don't underestimate the power of putting something out there in the world on LinkedIn and seeing what comes back to you. Step number 5, create a scoring matrix. Just like Kodiak, for example, helps our customers to be able to score their supplier base or prospective supplier base on areas of business practices, compliance, performance, risk, and alike. This is very important for you guys when you're evaluating technology as well. Map out your requirements, determine where they're weighted in their priority, and then, of course, have that example weighting within your overall evaluation of the market. Then and only then, and trust me, you can be able to do it before, but I'll tell you that now you won't be starting with the end in mind if you do so, but go book a demo, right? Find the solution providers that are right for you via Google or AI search, determine what your requirements are, and then go out to market. Don't do it before because, of course, then you're going to let the functionality and features guide the way that you're able to buy. Determine what is your end state, then go out to market. So with that being said, if you are interested in booking a demo with Kodiak, I'd be remiss, of course, with not just asking if you are, then feel free to, on screen now, go ahead and book a demo here with one of our SRM experts. The call to action is on the screen right now. If you'd be interested, of course, in digging in, all you need to do is just press directly on that particular button and feel free to book a demo with one of our experts, and they'll be happy to guide you through who Kodiak Hub is and what it is that we're capable of. Step number 7, proof of value, proof of concept. Stress test real processes and workflows. Map your processes, but also work alongside the vendors in the market to map those processes and then see it in action. Stress test things. Don't take, for example, a word for it. Make sure that you see things in action, see things engineered, and of course, see where the pockets or gaps are as well. Every solution will have them. You need to be able to determine who is a vendor that you can work towards closing those gaps with if they're essential to your use case. But the bottom line is you're going to have to make changes in your process. You're going to have to make changes in your expectations. You're going to, of course, have to make some concessions on what is priority for your business as well. With that being said, change management, process change management is essential to be able to adopt new technology. And I think that gets directly into step number 8, which is making sure that you have the key success factors for rapid deployment and adoption in place. Because buying technology is not just for the sake of having a new glossy tool, it's for actually using it and creating business impact. That's starting with the end in mind, and that should be the end goal. Well, what do we determine are some of those 4 areas that are essential? Well, good governance, enough resources, good insight and buy-in from leadership, and know-how, subject matter expertise in your business as well as then within the vendor business as well. What do we typically expect is, of course, that you need to look at investing resources in that project. You need to have a designated project manager, and you need to expect to involve key stakeholders in the project. With that being said, a modern AI and SaaS solution, you should not have to have a heavy lift for IT. And if IT is expecting that there is going to be a heavy lift, then you need to be able to swap that down and combat that right at the start, but also keep them involved from the start from an architecture perspective to make sure that IT knows how this solution is potentially going to interact with your existing solutions, master database, ERP, S2P, and alike. So there we have it, our 8-step guide to the going to market for SRM software from a vendor, from best practices that we've seen in the market, with thousands of different discussions that we've taken with different procurement professionals, world-class procurement teams that not only trust us, but have looked to trust us as well. With that being said, I want to thank you all for the time that you spent today on today's session. It's been fruitful for me to be able to speak through some of these elements and put down to pen to paper some of the thoughts that we've been having in our minds for quite some time, because it's essential, of course, for us to be able to share the best practices that we've seen across prospects and customer base. With that being said, we'll kick it over to a question and answer session so that you guys can be able to have any of the questions that you have answered here now. And please feel free to drop those in the chat at the moment, and we'll get around to them when we can. Thank you so much. Hi, Ulrich. Yes, we will be sharing the slides directly following the session. So the Q&A is the last item, and then we will be sharing those slides for download. A lot of matrices, a lot of work tools to be able to utilize there. So I understand that you guys are probably interested in getting them. But we'll give another, 60 seconds here to see if there is any questions. Feel free, don't be shy. Formulate those and pop them into the chat if you do have any questions on today's content, our capabilities, or alike. That's great. Joe has a question here regarding requirement list. So we'll put this up on screen. Let's see here. So Joe had a question about regarding requirement list. What if we don't know what we are looking for? Well, then I do think that, for example, doing your homework on online research is essential. With that being said, obviously, of course, making sure that you look at Capterra, G2, and alike, what solutions are out there in the market that are, of course, trusted by others. And with that being said, of course, starting with the end in mind. Well, is there a problem? Is there a challenge? Well, of course, how are we looking to go and fix that and work backwards from there, right? I think that that's essentially the most important thing. Thomas has a question here of what the estimated time can be for a tool. Kodiak Hub, for example, is anywhere from 8 to 18 weeks, depending upon scope. Typically, the customers land on average around 12 weeks. So we're talking about an implementation of weeks rather than months or years. With that being said, we can't speak for other providers. I do know that, for example, if you're looking at suites, you could be looking at anywhere between 12 to 18-month implementation times as well. Ulrich has a question here that a challenge is low, make with low code platform. How would you tackle that? I think that this is a really interesting point here, right? You still have to have the resources to be able to develop, but also upkeep and continue to develop upon that particular low code platform or that solution. So obviously, going to a software provider for that capability can obviously be a little bit more attractive for businesses that don't have those competencies internally, if that's what you're alluding to there, Ulrich, as well. It seems as if those were all of the questions. So with that being said, we will then issue the slides here. So feel free to be able to download today's presentation. You see the slides there on screen, and you can be able to have those decision-making matrices as well as then the 8-step guide to the overall buyer's guide of how to go to market within the SRM space. So feel free to click the screen there. You have the call to action with a button to be able to get the slides on screen now. We'll give just a moment more for people to be able to do so. Super. Well, with that said, I want to thank everybody for taking the time, having during your busy schedules to be able to be in attendance today, and the engagement as well that was in the chat. And we will look forward to future sessions. If you're interested, of course, in speaking with our team, you have the opportunity to be able to do so. With that being said, bye for now.